Hello, 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 and welcome back to my channel. This is Murder She Told, and we are going to be getting into a good, hopefully productive conversation on missing white woman syndrome from the perspective of a black woman who loves true crime. Now, this is a big topic, and I'm not going to sit here and deny that. And it had kind of a streak of being on mainstream media due to the Gabby Petito case, and we'll get more into that further into the video. But obviously, as we know, with things like this, they talk about it, they bring pundits on to talk about it, they bring sociologists on to talk about it, people who've been talking about this and screaming at the top of their lungs about this for years and years and years. And, it gets a little bit of shine. They invite these people onto network television, onto talk shows and news shows to kind of give their 2 cents on it. And then that reverberates throughout social media, whether it's YouTube, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Twitter. And it kind of dies down after a while, as with most things that have their day in the sun. Now, I think I want to just insert this in right here, that missing white woman syndrome has bodies attached to it. A lot of these theories are always talked about as theories, when in reality, this society practices them, and it has real material consequences for those who are not deemed valuable in this society. As we talked about in the previous episode, there's a racial hierarchy in this country. Hi, welcome to America. If you don't know that by now, I don't know where the fuck you've been. But it has real material consequences to people of color, women of color particularly, in this country. And I think it's just important to talk about it. As I said before, this is part 2 of a 2-part prequel to the true crime stories that we are going to be talking about on this channel. Like I said in the previous video, my channel is going to consist, as of right now, of 2 different series. I think it's series. The first one is going to be my True Crime and Society series, where we are going to be discussing true crime stories in the traditional YouTube way of discussing true crime stories. I'm going to sit here, I'm going to tell you a story. Hopefully it's something that you've never heard of, and will bring a little bit of an educational aspect to true crime. Again, my goal for this channel is to discuss the stories of people who are marginalized, and those are the stories that I will be centering in this channel. We are not centering whiteness in this channel once again, but I think this is a really great way for you guys to, again, see my point of view and start to see where I'm coming from and the angle I'm going to be attacking these true crime stories from. So True Crime and Society is one series that I'm going to be doing on this channel. And then the second series I'm going to be doing is called Black Girl Reacts, and I will be reacting to documentaries on this channel. So we're gonna see kind of a peppering of all of those throughout the month. My plan is to post every Wednesday weekly, so you will either get a True Crime and Society video or a Black Girls React video for, the month. There'll be 2 of each per month typically, unless something crazy happens or I don't feel like uploading a video. So yeah, that's a little bit about this channel. Again, just kind of letting you know what the plan is and how it's going to be more structured and this and that, so you know what to look out for. Missing white woman syndrome is the reason why I was called to and felt inspired to make this YouTube channel. So we're going to start getting into the topic now. Like I said before, this is a big topic. There's a lot of emotions attached, but just hear me out. This is going to be me talking to you about my opinion on missing white woman syndrome. This is going to be me talking to you about why I feel that way and relating that to my channel. So stay tuned. So, missing white woman syndrome, what is that? I will put the definition up here. And basically, essentially, in my own words, I would describe it as the hyper focus on white, attractive, young, upper class women when they come up missing. Now, this is something that we've all lived through. This is something that we've seen multiple times in our lifetimes. You know, there's Natalee Holloway currently with the Gabby Petito case. We have Madeleine McCann. We have JonBenét. All of these cases are cases that we remember. They're cases that were sensationalized at a time in our lives where we were watching the news and knew what was going on. There are cases that have now had the victims become household names. I would throw Laci Peterson in there because I think that is also another case where, you know, the American public was completely rabid for new news and new details about what happened to these women. Now, I think it's important to put a little bit of a disclaimer here because, like I said in the first video, I have loved true crime since I was a little kid. True crime is my favorite genre of media to consume. And so I'm really familiar with this topic. And me making this video is not to say that those women did not deserve the media attention they got, that their cases were wrong or justice wasn't served or anything of that sort. I was just as wrapped up in these cases as everybody because they were everywhere. They seemed unbelievable, all of these cases. And so I want to make it clear that I was with everybody and I was wrapped up in the new developments of each of these cases when they would be rehashed. Now, when it comes to missing white woman syndrome and the news coverage, we have to understand that it's the news coverage of the time. So we know that when the case first drops to the public, you know, it spreads like a wildfire in California, child. It's like YouTube, TikTok, podcasts, all kind of come together to bring this case to the common conscious of the people. And then you have the news. And then you have, you know, in Gabby Petito's case, there's Dr. Phil specials, 2020 specials. All of these things happen in real time as we're trying to figure out the details of what happened to this woman. Where is she? What's going on? What do we know so far? All of these things. But I want to tack on to missing white woman syndrome. Not just a news coverage of when it was going on in real time, but also the focus and the obsession with the cases afterwards. Do you know what I mean? Like, I believe Madeleine McCann had a docu-series on Netflix, and you know, she went missing when I was still really young. So, you know, I'm talking about the longevity of the stories and how they're still central in our consciousness when it comes to true crime, women, missing people in this country. Do you know what I mean? Also, just to say, missing white woman syndrome was coined by a Black American news anchor, and her name was Gwen, I believe, Ifill. That's how I read it. Ifill. Well, I think the name of missing white woman syndrome kind of may confuse people at certain times, but this is kind of what true crime, the cornerstone of true crime. The cornerstone of popular true crime as a genre is legitimately missing white woman syndrome, period. If you scroll through Netflix, if you scroll through Amazon Prime, any streaming service, even YouTube, and you search true crime documentary, how many of those stories have white people as the face of it? Either they're the perpetrator, either they're the victim, or they're both of those things. How many stories center whiteness when you just type in true crime documentary? Now, I want to bring us back to the definition of true crime because we will keep going back to this. The definition of true crime is extremely vague, and I said that in the first video. It essentially means that somebody is deciding to retell the story of a crime that actually happened. That's as vague as it gets. Now, to me, when you Google true crime story, when you Google or Amazon Prime or Netflix or search up a true crime documentary, it's typical that the stories that you're going to see are going to center whiteness, center a white woman victim, and they are going to essentially have a similar kind of flow or storyline. Does that make sense? And when you compare that with the true definition of true crime, you realize there are purposefully a lot of stories that are being left out of the true crime genre that should get more recognition, that should be talked about more, which is, again, why I wanted to create this channel, to have a space where we could talk about those marginalized individuals, we could talk about systems of oppression, we could talk about this country and racism, we could talk about it all here. And I think that, like I said in the first video, true crime is a microcosm for the society in which it's being told as a media genre. So that being said, it is going to uphold the same systems that the country wants to underscore, as well as degrade people that the country wants to degrade. And that may sound crazy, but sociologically, just stay with me. Sociologically, it makes sense. Media is a powerful function of a society because it indoctrinates you. Remember when we were talking about George Washington and his wooden teeth and how that didn't make sense in the first video? If you haven't seen it, go back and watch that because we're talking, we were talking truth. We were telling truth. We were breaking down truth. But media is important to any society because it starts to tell people how to think, tell people how to exist with one another, tell people the certain values that this country values and how that can be reflected in your life. And so, since true crime is but a genre of media that we consume, it is not a stretch to obviously point out and discuss the ways in which that it upholds the current system as it is. And it does that through adding to the frenzy behind missing white woman syndrome. Like I said, missing white woman syndrome is literally the bread and butter of true crime. I just want to interject here and say, what I mean by principles that this country has upheld is the image symbolically of what a white woman means in this country. Now, I think most people of color know this because we're forced to kind of exist with this as a reality, and it shows up in many, many different ways. But societally, we are to look at white women under a specific kind of gaze. They are the epitome of beauty. Their hair is the epitome of beauty. Their body type is the epitome of beauty. Even though beauty trends for women are always fleeting, we know that. It's a construction of capitalism, blah, blah, blah. We know this, we know this, we know this. But typically, it centers whiteness and Eurocentric beauty standards. In more kind of mythological senses, the white woman presents purity. She presents the culture of the nation. She presents innocence, true divine femininity in a lot of senses. When black men say that black women are masculine, when they are referring to or discussing why they step out or date interracially, oftentimes they lift up women with lighter skin as being more feminine and submissive and all of this. And that's all part of what we're indoctrinated to think like. That's not obviously a rule or necessarily true at all because we're all individuals. But symbolically, the white woman represents these tenets. And you may feel it or you may not feel it, but this is just factual. This is factual. If you don't believe me, I will be doing a Black Girls Reacts video to the movie 13th. And they do a great job of talking about that in like the first 10 minutes of the documentary when they're discussing Birth of a Nation and what that did for the culture, and how we're still feeling the effects of that movie to this day. So check that video out in the future. That'll be dropping soon. I am sure of it. And if you can't wait, you can watch 13th on YouTube for free. So highly recommend that. I think now is a time where I want to just put a disclaimer out. As the title says, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the Gabby Petito case, because I think for a lot of people, that is the first time they ever heard the term missing white woman syndrome. Okay? But for me, as I said, this is a term I've known for a very long time. But I think this is when the masses were first introduced to it, because it was finally able to have a little bit of airtime and be in our consciousness publicly for its moment in the sun, its little 15 minutes of fame. So I just want to put a disclaimer out here because, like I said before, the Gabby Petito case was a case that, as a lover of true crime, I was refreshing and trying to find every single detail about that case. I was hoping when she was just missing that she would turn up, or maybe they broke up and she decided to stay somewhere and didn't tell anyone to get her head right and she was going to come back alive. Like, these were things that I was praying into the universe and hoping to be true, that she would not be found dead. And unfortunately, as the days wore on and his family was less and less helpful with the police, and he disappeared, and, you know, everyone was posting stories about how they spotted him, how they gave him a ride, the body cam footage of, you know, the aftermath of that person calling about the domestic violence dispute, and how it, you know, it flipped onto Gabby, and all of these things started coming out where I was like less and less hopeful that she would come back alive, which is an awful place to be, just in the sense that she's a fellow woman, she's a fellow human being, and she died innocently. There's no reason why she died at 22 other than whatever was wrong with her fiance and his control issues and clear domestic violence issues. And it's so unfortunate that the closest person to her, who she was potentially about to marry, legitimately was the one to murder her. And his family, who is supposed to become your own family, they are aiding and abetting him and not helping with the investigation at all. I believe Gabby Petito's parents went on Dr. Phil and said, like, when we realized that he had come back home and she was not there, and we texted them asking about information about Gabby, whether she was there, whether they had heard from her, they never responded. And that was supposed to be her in-laws. So I knew things were funky in the milk, things were weird and murky in the water as soon as those reports started to come out. And my heart sank for her family, for her friends, for anyone she touched, any life she touched. And I just think it's a really, really depressing case. Though it's a simple case, it's a really, really depressing case because she was just living her 22-year-old life with her fiance, and she thought she was just going on a road trip with her fiance and came up dead. So I just want to say that I've been a consumer of this case. I have been watching for every detail of what's going on with this case. And I am in no way trying to disrespect her memory or trying to violate any kind of sense that she was a victim in this. I'm not trying to blame her for anything, which is a lot of the critique I've seen when people bring up missing white woman syndrome, like, oh, it's not the time, you're trying to overshadow, the efforts to find her and this and that. And we'll get into personally why I feel like that's a wrong response. We'll get into that later. But I just want it to be known that my heart goes out to her family. And this is literally by no means in relationship to her character, who she was as a person. This is simply an objective observation of a long legacy of this behavior by our media and by our culture. Now, I think it's important to talk about the fact that missing white woman syndrome is big money, which is so cynical. Like, it's kind of like when you say it out loud, you forget how cynical and dark money is in capitalist societies. It's just dark. Missing white woman syndrome is a profitable business niche, period. It's profitable for the news networks. It's profitable for the YouTubers. It's profitable for the TikTokers. It's profitable for the podcasters. It's profitable for everybody to hop onto this trend of missing white woman syndrome. In the case of Gabby Petito, and I'm going to keep it a buck, I heard that there was a TikTok creator that made over 70 videos about Gabby Petito's case. Again, no hate, no shame. She deserves people to care about her life. She deserves people to rally and unify in the hopes of finding her and finding out what happened to her. Of course. But this girl, or this person, let me say, on TikTok made over 70 videos surrounding the Gabby Petito case. And people were pointing out how as soon as the kind of culture shift changed to, it's important to talk about Gabby, but it's also important to acknowledge the fact that there are over 60,000 missing Black women in this country that have never seen the light of day, nor have they ever been able to rally this much media attention. She started posting 1 to 2 videos about missing Black women, which was like kind of like yeah, but it's also like, she already was able to profit directly by making those 70 videos. I think she was able to grow her followership. She was able to legitimize herself in the social media space, true crime space, through Gabby's story. That is something that is true for a lot of YouTubers during that time and a lot of podcasters during that time. And that's just facts. As for the news, which is where it gets the most cynical, as we know, our news media arm is heavily, unless you watch independent journalists, independent political pundits, independent news sources, the normal news coverage and news media business is funded solely by viewer count as well as advertising dollars. And this is where it gets sad. Missing Black and Indigenous women, missing women of color just don't sell as well as a missing attractive upper class white woman. Period. And that's also what it comes down to in this country. It's kind of this cross between our, internalized biases and our racism, as well as our capitalistic tendencies. So for these companies, it is often argued that we're not going to focus on her. We're not going to focus on this woman because we know that the viewership won't really care. They won't really tune in. They won't be enraptured by the story as much as if we take this other story about this young, attractive, blonde woman who, was murdered by her boyfriend. And that's where things get really sad, really dark, really capitalistic, and just kind of grimy. And I think that, it's just an important thing that we point out that there is money to be had to uphold this structure of missing white woman syndrome, but it's not ethically right or morally right. So again, that's just an important thing to know. Before we move forward and talk about my personal feelings about missing white woman syndrome and my examples of it through true crime, I just want to take a moment to point out that I think a lot of the coverage relating and connecting Gabby Petito to missing white woman syndrome is not just on the backs of people of color, and it's not for the intention of grabbing and stealing attention. In fact, her father underscored these very feelings in a press conference, and I'll insert that video here.
Ridiculously hard work that the FBI and law enforcement all around did. But social media has been amazing and very influential. And to be honest, it should continue for other people too. This same type of heightened awareness should be continued for everyone. And that goes for you all too.
Now, in that press conference, though he didn't specifically say missing white woman syndrome, he was speaking to the tenets of that thing. He was talking about how, he's really, really appreciative of the social media rallying around his daughter and trying to find out what happened to his daughter. And without the social media pressure, the FBI and the police were under pressure, were under a microscope to give us more information about what happened to Gabby, to find out more information about where Brian is and why his family isn't cooperating and all of those things. So he was really thankful for that. But he also took the time to say, that being said, he wishes that everybody who went missing and every family who had someone who went missing was able to feel what it felt like to have the power of the entire nation and the eye of the entire nation behind you trying to help you find your kid. And that spoke to me. So before you're in the comments talking about how I'm disrespecting her legacy or I'm disrespecting her in general because I'm bringing her name up and critiquing the systems at play that allow this to continue to happen, just understand that I'm not trying to say that she needed less media coverage. I'm trying to say that every other missing person of color, missing woman of color deserves the same amount of media coverage as she got, no matter what her skin tone was or her socioeconomic level was. And even Gabby Petito's own father spoke to those sentiments himself. So suffice it to say, I don't feel like I'm disrespecting her legacy if her own father pointed the hypocrisy and the fact that he knows that he's really lucky that the world rallied behind her. So I just want to throw that out there before people feel like they need to start, typing up in the comments about how I'm wrong and this and that. Like I said before previously, there are over, I believe, sorry, I need to get comfortable again. My leg fell asleep. There are over 60,000 missing Black women in this country, which is a big, big number. When they were, where Gabby Petito's body was found, and I know a lot of people have heard this statistic, but it's important to say, there were over 710 indigenous women in Wyoming, because Gabby Petito's body was found in Wyoming. There are over 710 open missing persons cases involving indigenous women over the past, I believe it was 10 years in Wyoming alone, that have never seen the light of day, have never gotten the same national news coverage. No one ever speaks about it. And that's for weird political shit that maybe I'll talk about in another video, as far as reservations and then, our country living in a cohesive way. But unfortunately, these statistics are real, and I'm sure you never heard them, or if you did hear them, it's through a video similar to this, where you're hearing for the first time that we have an issue here. We have kind of an epidemic here of just missing women in this country and the safety of women in this country, period. I think the statistic is 4 women die of domestic violence per day in this country, which is another statistic that people do not talk about, but is incredibly high, which is incredibly sad. Like 4 women every day in this country die from domestic violence, which is clearly what happened with Gabby. One of my favorite YouTubers, Khadijah, I'll link her channel down below. Not that she needs my rinky-dink help, but I think that she makes wonderful fucking videos, and I strive to be like her. She did a video on missing white women syndrome as well, and she was talking about how there's this kind of phenomenon, right, when, you know, there's a missing white woman case that people are gripped by the nation, and the updates keep rolling in about what's true, what's fake, what's happening, what's moving forward. And she was saying that, you know, she was talking about a specific case, I think in Canada, of a missing girl, and basically similar to Gabby, they found other missing they found other bodies when they were intending to find this specific girl. In Gabby's case, they found like 9 other bodies of people who were missing over the course of trying to find Gabby. But as they write it in this article, and she points out and says so beautifully, they basically are like, you know, they basically say they found such and such number of bodies as well as the girl they were intending to look for. In Gabby's case, that sentence would go, they found 9 bodies in the search of Gabby Petito. And for women of color in this country, for people of color in this country in general, for Black people and Indigenous people, that sums up exactly what we mean and how we feel. There are some people who are the bodies that are named, like Gabby Petito, and then the rest of us are those 9 other bodies. Do you see what I mean? Like, it's the subtlety behind it. And it's one of those things where, as a Black woman, I know that I would be described as 9 other bodies. I would not have the crown of Gabby Petito, if that makes sense. Like, sociologically, I'm considered one of the 9 other bodies that is not named, and their cases are not also amplified through social media and media in general. I'm just one of those 9 other bodies. And I just want to shout out Khadijah for pointing that fact out, because it's so true, and it's so sad, and it's so hurtful, but it's just another twist of a knife that's already deep in my fucking stomach at this point, growing up as a Black woman in America. It's nothing new. It's just really fucking sad. I think it's important to bring some Googleable examples into the mix so that everyone can kind of look into things yourself. This is not supposed to be like the all or nothing video on missing white woman syndrome. Again, I'm just trying to create the point of view of my channel through these theories and these concepts, so you know where I'm coming from. But I think it's important to always have some sort of concrete example that people can look into to prove the point that you're trying to make. So as far as missing white woman syndrome in true crime, I have 2 very different examples that I think are important to say. The first one being the Laci Peterson case versus the Evelyn Hernandez case. Now, if you follow my TikTok, link in the description, there's a video where I very, 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 very briefly talk about the Evelyn Hernandez case. And I want to let you know that I'm going to speak on it again very briefly, but I am fully prepared and planned and fully researched and ready to do a video down the line specifying the details of this case. So again, stay tuned for that, because that will be coming. But Evelyn Hernandez is not a household name. unfortunately. But she is often referred to as the other Laci Peterson because of how similar their cases were and how they both happened around a similar time. If I'm not mistaken, I think Evelyn's either happened before her, but her body was found after Laci's. I'm not sure of the whole timeline. I will definitely, be more specific about timelines when I talk more in detail about her case. But Evelyn Hernandez was a young woman. She was an immigrant, I believe, from the Dominican Republic or El Salvador. I'm not sure. But she was an immigrant who had very little family in the United States. So let's keep that there. She was a young mother, and she was a single mother who worked and went to school and eventually fell in love with someone she shouldn't have fallen in love with. They were, in her mind, in love, about to get married. She found out she was pregnant by him. He wasn't too excited about it, and she later found out that he was married, and she was the side girl, the side piece. Even though that had happened, she was still planning on carrying the baby full to term. She was still planning on having this baby, and she was still really excited about having another child. Now, mind you, her first son from a different man, he was about preschool age when all of this went down. So keep that in mind. Basically, she was fully planning on having this baby. She was still happy about being pregnant with this guy and all of this stuff, even though she was confronted with the truth that she was not his one and only, and she was having the baby of a married man. Now, it is obviously highly speculated about the events that occurred after, but Evelyn Hernandez came up missing. There's varied evidence, like her wallet was found somewhere close to her, boyfriend's work. Like, there are certain details where it's like, it's pointing to the boyfriend. But to me, because there was not a really intense investigation about her case, you can't say for sure. You know what I'm saying? Like, it could be a bigger plot. It could be a hitman. It could be a bunch of things in theory. But she came up missing. And after she came up missing, and her son was last seen with her boyfriend checking him out of preschool. And he was never seen again, never has been seen again, never has been found. Again, this case remains unsolved, and Evelyn was never seen alive again after it was around her due date to give birth, and people started asking questions when she didn't show up to the hospital to deliver her baby, which is like very strange. So, a very quiet investigation was found, and the police kind of left it as, this was going on in her life. Her boyfriend, who she thought loved her, that she was having the baby with, ended up being married. So she escaped to her home country to be with her family and have her baby there because the pressure was too much in America. Like, do you see how they make stories up before they have, like, proof to, like, say any of that? And this is what I mean by missing white woman syndrome. In a lot of these cases that I'm going to talk about, the common denominator will be police negligence early on, okay? It'll be the fact that people come up to the police, say certain things, try honestly to have them be involved in solving a case, and the police will just write them off. In Evelyn's case, they were like, oh, she clearly flew to her home country to be with her family because her life was in shambles here. And it's like, what do you mean she clearly would? Are there flight records where her name is there and her son's name is there? That doesn't explain her missing son. That doesn't explain a bunch of stuff, why she hasn't talked to any of her friends. That doesn't explain anything. And that's where they left it for months. That's where they just left her case. Even though there was evidence that her wallet was left by the guy's work, there's evidence that the guy was the last person to see her young son and check him out of school. Like, there is solid evidence for this guy to be a huge suspect in this case. He had motive, he had everything, and he was connected to her last seen whereabouts and the child's last seen whereabouts. But instead, the police were like, you know, she was sad and depressed because her life was a mess here, so she moved back and wanted to have the baby with her family. First of all, who travels on a plane when they're fully 9 months pregnant, days away from giving birth? That's confusing. That's not safe or healthy. So that's another red flag that, you know, this story is completely fabricated, and it seems like it was fabricated because they did not want to continue to search for her. And that's the sad part. Like, because it's not only her, it was the baby too. And the baby has never been seen again. Okay, this was a story that they were rocking with until they couldn't rock with that story anymore, when her decapitated pregnant body, much like Laci Peterson's, washed up on the shore in the Bay Area. And they had to confront the fact that clearly this woman did not move back home to have her child and live happily ever after. Clearly, there was some foul play involved in this case. And because of the fact that they made up that story, they lost a lot of leads. They lost potential. They lost time. They lost information. The son has never been seen again. His body has never been recovered, but it's greatly assumed that he also was murdered. Unfortunately, rest in peace to that young soul. That's really fucking sad. And there's still evidence that points to the boyfriend, but clearly he's never been charged because, you know, now they're opening up cold cases, and there's lots of new like genealogy stuff where they can like close out these crazy cold cases. You know, they just named the Zodiac killer, even though that's like people are like speculative about that. They named the East Area rapist, or the California rapist, the Golden State Killer. They named him through genealogy. So it's still possible that her case could be solved, obviously, over time. But to me, the disgusting part is just the negligence on behalf of law enforcement when it came to this case, when we have a direct case that is so eerily similar to compare it to. For example, the Laci Peterson case, which is household. I knew that case backwards and forwards when I was a kid. I was watching his interviews on Good Morning America. I remember when he dyed his hair. I remember when he was convicted. I remember when he was trying to flee to Mexico with like $15,000 and he dyed his hair. Like, I remember all of these things about Laci Peterson's case. She was a pregnant, attractive woman who was married to an attractive man. They were popular. She came up missing. Her body also washed up in the Bay, in an area close. I think it was a Bay Area as well. Her pregnant body washed up in the Bay Area as well. And these stories are like a couple years at most apart, at most. So it's interesting when you're able to compare it to a case like Laci Peterson, which is a household name. We all kind of know what kind of happened, even if you're a casual viewer and not obsessed with true crime like I am. And then we have this other case, Evelyn Hernandez, that is so eerily similar. On top of that, there's also a missing child in her case that still remains unsolved and probably will not be solved because in the hierarchy of value in this country, which is really the only difference between these women and their cases. Laci was married, sure. They were both pregnant. Their bodies were both washed up on the shore. They were murdered by their significant others. For Evelyn, allegedly, obviously, but there's a lot of evidence, and we'll talk more about that when I do the specific true crime video on her. But it's like the direct comparison of these two cases, it's hard to deny that there are some sort of discrepancies here. Evelyn Hernandez's case did not get national news. I think it was on her disappearance was printed in some newspapers, and there was a couple newspaper articles, no front page articles, no national news attention, no local, I think, on-air news attention either, until her body was discovered, obviously washed up on the shore. That was where her case ended and died, with her on like the 15th page of a newspaper talking about it. While Laci Peterson's case was like a reality TV show that was being sensationalized and broadcast to our TVs every night for like a year straight. We knew about her relationship with Scott. We knew about the relationship between Scott and her parents. We knew about Scott's cheating. We knew who the woman was. She was interviewed. We got his phone records. He was recorded talking to the lady at like Laci's vigil. There are all of these things that we know, and details about the case that were literally reported on every single day, the new developments. And someone like Evelyn Hernandez, who had a pretty much exact same case, exact same kind of motive, exact same kind of situation, both pregnant women, young women, beautiful women, victimized by their significant others. And the real main difference, aside from the fact that Evelyn also lost a child that was alive and was super young, was the fact that Evelyn Hernandez was an immigrant. She was brown, she was a Latina, and Laci Peterson was a young, attractive, upper middle class white woman, and she got it explains itself. It explains itself. These stories could have worked together to help each other be solved, right? But instead, one story was put on a pedestal, while this other story most people have never, ever, ever heard about. And it just makes you sick. There's not even a lot of information really about the Evelyn Hernandez case, because it was written off so intensely by the police when they could have been searching for clues when she originally came up missing. And it's just really sad. It's depressing. She is even in death referred to as the other Laci Peterson. Like, her name isn't even her own name. Her name has no recognition. It holds no weight. But because Laci Peterson's name is a household name, her name is now the other Laci Peterson throughout true crime. And it's just sick. It's just sick. Because this woman was also a human being. She was a woman pregnant. All of the same sympathies could have been relayed to Evelyn as well when it came to Laci's disappearance. All of the same similarities could have been shared between the two cases. These two cases, had the police who originally got the report of Evelyn being, found missing or coming up missing, they could have taken that seriously instead of writing her off and writing her situation off and being like, oh, she went home and to have her baby with her family because her life was a wreck in California. Imagine what kind of detail, what kind of evidence they could have gotten about her case had they taken it seriously. But this is not just a fluke. This is not just the specific police department or specific police chief that okayed that kind of behavior. You will see through the stories that I'm going to tell on this channel that this is a common denominator thing. Negligence by the police. The assumption that because you're this color, you're of this class, you are a sex worker, you are a drug user, that your life matters less, and that you probably weren't hurt or murdered. And instead of doing a process of elimination and truly investigating that fact, we're just going to assume you ran away or you left or it was your choice, without even thinking 2 seconds more about it, without even trying to confirm whether that is true or not. They just say, they ran away. And that's the case. And we're moving on to another case. And it hurts you at a point. It starts to really, really hurt you. And as I was doing research for this channel, the stories, it's just one of those things where you just get more and more, I don't even know if it's jaded or cynical about the way this country runs, because every piece of it is meant to basically tell people that look like me or relate to my experience in this country who are marginalized that we mean less than white people do. We mean less than, upper class people do. We mean less because, people do sex work and other people don't. Like, it's just, again, a constant reminder of the value system and the hierarchy in this country. If you're not white but you make money, then maybe, if Evelyn Hernandez was a rich woman, then maybe the case would have gotten even a fraction of the national attention that Laci Peterson's case was. And Laci Peterson only got that attention, not to be shady. The case was, it was worth it to have that media attention on that case because it was solved. But, and she was, her death, there's justice found for her death, of course. But the reason why she got it out the gate and her case was taken seriously by police out the gate was because of her complexion and her socioeconomic status and the fact that she was conventionally attractive. Period. It tracks. This other example is, again, it's going to be another full-length true crime story on this channel. So, the details are going to be a little bit sparing, and I'm not going to, talk about, the victims by name and stuff like that. That's just what it is. If you would like to see the documentary that I'm referring to and I'm talking about, there is a Vice documentary on this, I believe called The Cleveland Strangler, on YouTube for free, and I believe I will be watching that on Black Girl Reacts as well. So if you want to watch me watch it and check to see if you want to watch it, that's great. If you want to wait for my true crime episode where I talk about this full length, that would also be wonderful. But I'm going to be talking about this story again in a similar sense that as Evelyn Hernandez's story, because it's an important story that isn't nearly talked about enough. Going back to the other material consequences that come with missing white woman syndrome, because again, people like to talk about it and people like to critique it like it's just a theory that hurts nobody. That it's just a thing that we're saying. It's just a thing the radical left is saying or the black people are saying because it's their opinion about how the world works and this and that. I just want to pose this question before I go into this next example right here. If there are over 60,000 black women missing in this country, I believe black women hold the biggest missing statistic of women, of the population of women in this country. How does it make sense that, one, we hold the first place for missing women in this country? We are only 13% of the population, so discrepancies there. And you probably, and I'm not doing this to attack you because I also probably can't name one either. You probably can't name a black woman whose case got the exact same media attention as Natalee Holloway's case. And if you can, type it down below. But I'm looking for specifics. I'm looking for the exact same media impact and media attention that was given to Natalee Holloway or JonBenét Ramsey. If you can think of like 3, that would be great. Type them down below. My mind is drawing a blank completely. And I think that's important to discuss when we're talking about missing white woman syndrome. the fact that there's such a high rate of missing Black women in this country, yet you and I both can't name a case centering a missing Black woman that got nearly as much media attention, or a fraction of as much media attention as a Natalee Holloway or a JonBenet Ramsey's kind of case. That's the discrepancy that we're talking about, because that doesn't make sense at a point that's deliberate. Do you know what I mean? At a point that's deliberate. And I think it's important that we frame this conversation in no uncertain terms around that fact, because it doesn't make sense. I was racking my brain trying to think of a case. I've been doing research for a year and a half on unknown cases. It's like I could not think of any case of a Black woman that got nearly as much media attention as this case, as any of those cases that I just named. There's discrepancies there. And what we're asking for is, we see the value of media's involvement in finding out what happens to these people. We see the value of the intervention of people on social media telling their experiences. In the case of Gabby Petito, the girl talking about how she picked up Brian Laundrie. He was hitchhiking and all of that stuff that was able to place him in this place. And the value of eyewitnesses have always meant a lot to a criminal case of violent crime. And you won't get there unless you spread the word far and wide. Do you get what I mean? And it's unfortunate that there's so many lives and so many stories and so many missing persons cases that will never be solved, and no effort to be solved will be put in order to get to the bottom of getting these families justice for their child or whoever. And we just need to talk about that, because it's really fucking sad. It's devastating. It's depressing. It makes you jaded. It makes you not care about anything, because it's like, what's the point even? And we'll get, again, at the end, I'll talk about my personal feelings about that. But it's just really unfortunate. As for my second example, I'm going to be referring to the documentary The Unseen. Like I said before, there is another documentary on YouTube by Vice about the Cleveland Strangler, and this story is crazy from top to bottom. This story is insanity from top to bottom. So I'll just tease you with that, because I will be talking about it. But as you can tell by the title, it happened in Cleveland, I believe in like 2000, in the 2000s, in the early 2000s to 2010s in some capacity. 11 bodies were found in a house by a guy who killed them, who lived in the neighborhood basically all his life. And there are really creepy and eerie details about smells coming from the house, the neighborhood that, go into racist infrastructure. And we will get into that in this long form video that I'm going to talk about this. But 11 bodies were found, I think, in the span of 2 to 4 years, in a house, rotting, in a backyard, rotting. Okay, all of them Black women, all of them poverty-stricken, and all of them either sex workers or drug users. Now, the messed up part about this case is, before the police actually took it seriously, I believe 2 to 3 women who escaped that house and escaped him attempting to murder them. One woman fell out of a second-story window. Okay. Another one fought for her way out, fought for her life, had to trick him. These women went to the police to tell their stories and to tell their case and plead their case about this man, what they saw in the house, how he tried to kill them, all of this stuff. And the police did nothing for months, for weeks, and some for years. And he killed 11 bodies in various states of decomp as we know it were recovered from that house. And here's what I mean by the material consequences. What people think about liberal people, left-leaning people, or people of color bringing up this phenomenon of missing white woman syndrome, they usually think that we're nitpicking. They usually think that we're trying to find racism in everything and everything's racist and that's just your opinion about the system. That doesn't make it true. And all of these things. People have a lot of critiques when you bring up missing white woman syndrome. And maybe it's because, you know, a hit dog will holler, obviously. But the reality is, with missing white woman syndrome and, you know, what it represents, what it shows is there is a certain type of victim that will get national news attention, that will get the whole country looking at you and the crime that was committed by you. And there's a whole slew and population of people where you can do those very same crimes without the national media or anything even caring remotely about finding you or trying to bring justice to that person. Do you know what I mean? There's a victim where you can do everything you want to them without the fear, really, unless it gets as big as this case did, of people breathing down your neck and the media breathing down your neck about it. And then there's the missing white woman, upper class, beautiful, who, as soon as she goes missing, there's a SWAT team at your door. People are looking. People are searching. The whole nation is making videos. They were making YouTube videos about the stickers on the back of Gabby Petito's van and comparing pictures of those stickers and the formation and how they put those stickers up and if that proved, like, you know, this was their van and stuff like that. Like, that's how in detail these YouTube videos were getting when it came to the Gabby Petito case. In the case of the Unseen documentary and the Cleveland Strangler case, he had been murdering women for years. But again, these women are hard to sell to the public. They are sex workers. They are black. They are, you know, poor. They are drug users. And for some reason, law enforcement, that means that they are no longer human beings and no longer deserve justice for their case. They no longer deserve to be found. They no longer deserve to, you know, be able to have some sort of justice come about their situation, whether it's finding their body, whether it's finding them alive. They don't deserve an investigation at all. What makes it worse with this situation is that these 11 women were, like, they didn't have to die because there was police reports and data. There were police reports and data that proved that people who survived this man's attacks had gone to them for help, had admitted what had gone on in that house, had admitted what they'd seen in that house. And they still wrote these people, these missing people off as, oh, they're just drug addicts and sex workers, and that's just the name of the game. I'm not investigating this case. So as much as, you know, there's that overshadowing effect for stories in Evelyn Hernandez's case where they're eerily similar, one got the media attention, one did not, and you see where their cases ended up in terms of justice, right? Then there's the aspect of, by reifying this idea that, you know, we sensationalize and obsess over these missing white women cases with a very particular demographic of white women, that gives ideas to people who want to cause harm to other humans, who want to murder, who want to do violent crimes to other people, that, okay, if I'm going to hunt, if I'm going to do my illicit activity, I'm going to do it in this community because I know for a fact that I will be able to do it in this community with little to no disturbance. I forgot his name, but there was a serial killer, a white man who lived in South Central LA for years, murdering people. I think it was over 20 years, murdering people in that area. And he said that he did that because he knew that nobody cared about black people and that he could just continue to kill people with very little repercussion, if any, until it was in the face of the media to finally do something. There was a serial killer that said that and did that, who existed in the hood for 20 years, killing people. That's what I mean by the consequences of these ideas. That's what I'm talking about. So, like I said before, Evelyn Hernandez and the Cleveland Strangler case are both cases that I will be covering in my True Crime and Society series, so stay tuned for those long-term videos. But these are just a few or a couple examples of how missing white women syndrome actually has material effects to people of color, and how it's just not an opinion thing. It's not us trying to fit our way into every situation. We are just pointing out the obvious, and we aren't trying to be, difficult. We just want the same level of justice as these women get for their cases, for our people. So I think I'm going to end it here with my personal opinion to missing white woman syndrome and how it makes me feel. We're going to just riff about how it makes me feel. Obviously, as you can guess, pretty negatively. Here's the thing. During the pandemic, me and probably most people who were unemployed were on social media more than we had ever been on social media. Like, I was at work 8 hours a day. I would be on my phone, but I wouldn't be on my phone, and so when the pandemic hit and we're all, tuning into Versus and watching, different people's lives and seeing the entertainment on social media and all of that and consuming it, I was consuming it at a much higher level than I usually would. And what I would find, sorry. I'm tearing up. What I would find that would make me emotional is that no matter what social platform I was on, no matter the time of day, no matter how long I was on it, I would see at least one missing person's flyer for someone's family member or someone's friend that they were trying to find. And again, I follow people, that look like me typically. So, it was a lot of people of color that I was coming up on, seeing their flyers and stuff like that. Young girls, young boys, kids, older women, moms, all sorts of people. It ran the gambit. But the one unifying factor was they were all considered people of color or black people or indigenous people. In fact, there was somebody that I knew who went missing for a period of time. Thank God they were later found. I'm very happy about that because they're a wonderful light of a person. But I was posting up a flyer of somebody I knew during quarantine, okay? And it seemed like it was nonstop. No matter the day, no matter the time, I would see these flyers. And these flyers would say, missing from yesterday, missing from 2 weeks ago, missing for 4 months, missing for 4 years. Years. And these people haven't heard anything. The police haven't done much in the case. They haven't tried to figure out what happened. They're still looking for answers independently. None of these cases made it onto true crime TikTok. None of these cases made it onto true crime YouTube or podcasts or anything. There's no national news coverage about these people. But I would see with my own eyes every day at least 1 to 2 flyers of someone who had been missing for a varying amount of time. They had no clue where they could be, and they were just hoping that if you shared this, someone would be able to point them in the direction of hopefully this person alive, hopefully their body, hopefully some information that led to an arrest or some justice. And for the cases that had been, 4 years, a year, the captions, people trying to desperately find answers, what it caused, the pain that it caused these people was emotional. And then I see Gabby Petito's case begin to pick up steam. Within a month of me seeing the first video about it, it was everywhere. It was everywhere. I knew everything. I knew that Brian was gone. I knew he was on the run. I knew people had picked him up hitchhiking. I knew the details about the stickers on the back of her car. I knew who she was. I knew all of these details about her life. I knew how her friend felt about her boyfriend. I saw the body cam footage. All of these things were coming together so quickly right before my eyes. And part of me was so happy that things and answers were being found in the hopes that they would find this 22-year-old, beautiful, seemingly kind young woman who didn't deserve to be missing. I was glad that they were coming in real time. But for people that look like me and me myself, the other half of that coin, the other face of the coin, is the fact that I'm watching all of these systems, the media, social media, the law enforcement systems of this country work together in order to find answers. And I realized, so it does work. Like that's what I just thought in my mind. So it does work. So it can work. So it just doesn't work for people that look like me. And that's a heavy thing to swallow. Like, that's really heavy to swallow. But of course, at 25, as a Black woman, this is just another day in the life, which is the sad part. Like, that's where the sadness hits its depths, okay? It's just sad that I know now, even though I have loving friends and loving family, of course, if I came up missing, if I were murdered, if I was being held captive even, I don't know if I would be found. I don't know if I'd even be able to rally a local news station to do a story about me. And I don't think I would, which is the sad part. Would the police even look for me, or would they say I ran away? Do you hear what I mean? It's just sad. And full transparency, of course. Like, this is one of a million ways that I know that my life doesn't equal in value to other people's life. And I'm not saying my opinion on that. I'm not saying I think my life is of low value. I know for a fact societally, my life as a Black woman is not valued very highly by basically everything, everywhere that I look, everything that I see. Out the gate, as a Black woman, you are told you are ugly, bitch. Your body, your nose, your hair, your skin tone, all of these aspects of you are ugly. And that's facts. That's what you're told from the gate. So this is nothing new to sit with that and know that. It still hurts though, but it's the truth. You know, I know there's a value system. I know there's a hierarchy here. I studied sociology for that reason, to understand those things. But it doesn't make it hurt less, and it doesn't make it mean any less, cuz it's just cuz it's the way things are. You know, I'm supposed to just accept it. No. I know I'm beautiful. I have a beautiful family, and they always told me I was beautiful. This is not an indictment on them. It's an indictment on society, because as soon as I step out of my bubble, I'm confronted in a million different ways that I will never amount to the same value as some random Midwestern blonde chick who goes missing in Mexico. Even if I also go missing in Mexico under similar circumstances. And that's the turning of the knife that is perpetually stabbed into your back by society, by this country, as a woman of color, as a Black woman, and just twisted periodically, just so you feel it, just so you know. You know, it's diabolical, really, but it's the way it works here. You got to know your place here, unfortunately. This is how this country works. These are the values this country continues to reify through media, through true crime, through this missing white woman syndrome thing. I think that it's really important that we all come together, and whenever you see a missing persons flyer, you just repost it and try, because more likely than not, if it's a person of color, that is the only means of them trying to get answers about their missing loved one. So if you could throw your hat in the ring and try to do that, and try to amplify their voices, especially talking to you white people, because your voices hold weight. If you see that and you do that, you're doing a little bit of your part to try and amplify and get answers for these stories, because they're not going to get a media circus. They're not going to get media attention in the same way. They are not going to get that. And you sharing or repinning Pinterest, retweeting any information or a flyer could be the missing link to lead someone to finding out what happened to their loved one, if they're still alive or if they're dead or where their bodies are. Like, when I saw that flyer that was like 4 years old and they're like still holding out hope, it was deep. It was deep, babe. That it's like, and this is what happens with us. And so to see the Gabby Petito case get risen into the consciousness at an exponential rate and continue to stay there, she is now going to be a household name as with the likes of Natalee Holloway and, you know, Madeleine McClain and you know, JonBenet Ramsey and stuff like that. She's going to be a household name just like them. But to know that her own dad pointed out the fact that we should have the same energy with every missing person's case, just so we can get to the bottom of these cases, as well as, you know, knowing that, you know, there's, and seeing with my own eyes how many people went missing over the course of the pandemic alone, and that they're likely not going to be found, and the police are likely not trying to help them be found, is heavy, to say the least. It's heavy. It makes you cynical. It makes you jaded. It makes you pissed. It makes you angry. It makes you sad. It makes you all of the emotions. It's like a big emotional salad. But I just wanted to talk about this topic in my own way, because this is a catalyst for this channel, because missing white woman syndrome is the bread and butter of true crime. So now that we are ready to get into the true crime episodes and the documentary reactions, Black Girl Reacts, True Crime in Society, I'm so excited that I was able to do these 2 prequel videos for you guys so you can see my point of view, you can see my perspective, you can see I'm coming with good information, I'm coming with good, topics, all of those stories that got ignored. I want to talk about them on this channel. I want this to be a place to be for those stories to be discussed in this true crime space on YouTube. And I will continue to strive for that. That's pretty much it. So please like, subscribe, comment on my video. I would greatly appreciate the interactions. Please comment below, even if you disagree with my opinion, even if you disagree with the way I'm talking about it. I'd like to hear it. I'm down to hear it. I have thick skin. Please share this with anybody you think would like it. All my important links are linked in the description. Stay tuned for another video. And I guess all I have to say is Black Lives Matter and Free Palestine until it's backwards. Love you.